Full selectmen to order, please. First on our agenda is a request for a vote on shopping bags.
Madeline Williams is here to speak to that, and she's here to make to talk to you about it.
Great, yeah. Do you want me to stand up?
Your choice. Yeah, sure. Stand up.
So, Sarah Sullivan and I submitted a letter proposing 2 ordinances for Bethel on a single-use plastic bag ban, a single-use paper bag fee, and a expanded polystyrene ban.
I failed in my anxiousness to do a good job for the town. I'm new here. So I failed to introduce you properly in that you are a student.
Yes.
So it's appropriate, I think, if you would tell the board a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Madeline Williams. I am a senior at the Academy. I've lived in the area for 17 years.
Keep talking about the issue. I am off to the important job of trying to find more chairs.
Okay. Yeah, so I've lived in the area for 17 years, and since coming to school and really entering high school, I really found out that I'm passionate about the environment, and seeing the use of single-use waste in Bethel is something that I'm concerned about. So I realized that it could be brought to the board and town for the town's decision to the better solution.
And my name is Sarah
What would you
Sullivan,
like to say?
and I lived here for 20, we've lived here full time
You have to
for
take this.
15 years, and I've been a science teacher for 31 years, and my interest in plastic has been long. Like I know the effects. I know that plastic never ever breaks down, and so it's been something I've been concerned about for a long time. And Maddie and I just sort of at the same time were thinking about an ordinance for the town, and so we came together and we did show a movie in July at the theater called Daggett, and we had a good attendance at the movie and a lot of support for us pursuing this, so that's why we continue to keep working together and come up with a proposal to you all.
I've spent my life in small town governments, and part of the joys that I've experienced over that time is working with, excuse me, but I have to call you a young person.
Okay.
Compared to me, trust me, you are a young person.
No worries.
Yeah, about how town government works. And what Maddie and I talked about when she came in was that she brings this notion before the select board. And you have different ways that you, as you probably know, that you can react to what she's asking. You can agree with her that this question should be put on a future town meeting ballot or election ballot. You can say, well, you're an awfully nice young person, but we don't agree with you. And at which time I would have the job of helping Maddie circulate it, not help her circulate the petition, but telling her how that process works. So if she chooses, she can circulate a petition. In either case, in talking to her, I hear that she would like to develop an ordinance and bring that before the town, in which case, if it's done by petition or not, it would be referred to your ordinance committee. And they would comment, make additions, deletions of the ordinance that's presented. And if she needs a petition, then you would have then, if she gathers enough signatures, then that would still be placed on the ballot, even though a majority of you may not agree. If a majority of you do agree, then the only difference is she wouldn't circulate the petition. Is that
Absolutely.
about what I told you?
Yes.
Okay, it's so good when I get it right twice in a row.
Not as fun.
You,
So any discussion amongst the selectmen?
We had this question come up last year when we voted it down.
Right.
And I stated at the time that it would be detrimental to the Swain Family Farm business. Because we have hundreds of customers who save their plastic bags all winter long so that we don't have to buy them. And we recycle them, we reuse them all the time. I know that's not recycling per se, but we do have, like I said, we have a lot of customers that save them all winter for us. So we have taken a lot of them out of the landfill and reused them, and they keep bringing them back. So I would have to say no to that, because of that reason.
On that note, I would have to say that you have to abstain from that vote due to the conflict of interest within your family business there, because it would directly affect your business, potentially, so I'm not sure if you would be able to vote on them if you like that.
Can I have some guidance on that, please?
Well, it's close. It's really, I guess,
That you, if that were the case, then every citizen would, in theory, have to abstain from voting on something.
well, it only, so as far as the
When
conflict of
there's
interest.
citizens gathering potentially thousands of bags so that they don't have to buy them, that's a very,
That's recycling.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying, Andy. So my understanding of conflict of interest in this case, and in most cases that affect the select board, if voting for something or not voting for something means that you will gain some kind of personal financial interest, either through your business or otherwise, then you're excluded from voting. If it's something else, so in other words, if Lori saves money by being allowed to have plastic bags for her business, then you're probably right, I would say that would be a conflict of interest.
I mean, I'm
Because
totally
it's-
down for
because it's financial,
recycling, that
and
sounds
that's-
awesome,
and that's fine.
everyone would do that, but
It's just, whereas
by the law.
I use plastic bags in my day-to-day life, and I may like or dislike plastic bags in my day-to-day life, but I don't own a business that has plastic bags as a part of their business, and so it wouldn't affect me financially. So
Okay.
therefore, I could perhaps vote and Lori perhaps couldn't. But if you have a business where plastic bags are part of your economic equation, then perhaps you wouldn't vote on this.
you, my advice to the board would be to, if it's a big concern, to refer it to Maine Municipal for, I don't agree with you. Sometimes you and I don't agree.
It's all good,
Yeah.
I get that a lot.
You're a fine young man. But I think the conflict of interest law may be more narrow than that. I think that in this case, I personally just wouldn't have a problem with Lori's vote on the issue. However, if the board holds it in question, it's probably the right thing to refer the matter to the municipal. It would take them a day to make a ruling.
Right, and you could be, maybe it would only affect you if, for example, you manufactured plastic bags. Then you would clearly have a conflict of interest.
Right.
Bobby, got it.
I would think to follow your line of thinking, you folks would have trouble voting on anything that impacted property taxes, or buying winter sand, or anything like that. I mean, I don't see why it doesn't affect you as taxpayers, a lot of your decisions you make.
Yeah, it's a little more, right, as taxpayers, I suppose,
But, well, it's your personal, just like her, it's a personal wallet.
and in some cases, we do vote specifically to keep our taxes. In many cases, we vote to try to keep our taxes.
I'm
in
not
check,
saying you
both
don't,
from
but I mean,
personal
I think
and
no matter how you vote, I mean, I just think it's very similar, that
and a lot of times, but usually it's more specific than that. Does it directly affect your personal business or your, it's
And I mean, I'm all about recycling, for sure, but again, when we're looking at that, on that aspect, right, I mean, you would have to buy plastic bags, but if the ordinance went through, you wouldn't be able to use plastic bags, I don't think, right? Within your business, or would you be
Yeah,
taxed
and so
hard
that's
because of
an
it?
interesting, because the ordinance, if there's an ordinance, it clearly hasn't been written.
Right.
So, I think it would be, it'd be worth looking at, do you put in you're specifically talking about single-use plastic bags. If someone's sourcing their plastic bags as reused bags, you can write anything you want in an ordinance.
Right,
So
and then that
maybe
potentially would make it
that
where Lori might not even have
Right,
the issue with the plastic bags then, if there was something that developed where, recycled, reused plastic bags were still accepted.
Not everyone gets it.
Or just an extra
Plastic bags.
tax for somebody that's not, because it's a personal choice to use the plastic bags in your business.
I just don't want to.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Supposing the plastic bags at the grocery store go away, or they're cheaper?
We're proposing a single-use plastic bag ban and a single-use paper bag fee.
So you have to pay for the paper bag that you're going to use at the grocery store. Like it's saying,
Where I've seen
they
with
even
plastic
have
bags.
plastic bags, for sale.
Right, there will be no more plastic bags for sale at the point of our grocery store, and there will be a fee on the paper bag fee in the store.
Okay, so how does it work with, the side out, recycled bag?
Recycled bags could fall under the category of reusable bags, or in the ordinance.
Hi, Pat Abraham. So the ordinance hasn't been written yet.
This is just-
So the vote today, just for clarification, is just to bring this to town meeting to come up with an ordinance review committee to write an ordinance, correct?
Correct. Or not.
Right, or
Either
not,
way,
right.
of
So
course.
I guess the question that we're just considering today is just, do we want to ask more of the town if they agree with the serious issues, correct?
There are 15 towns in Maine who have adopted ordinances to either ban plastic or have fees on their plastic bags. So we are treating it for no plastic, so I think we're going to that. But there, I think it is something the town is going to have to address really soon, just because, our recycling of plastic is, China's no longer taking our plastic, so it's all gonna go into landfills now, and, so we really, I think if we start thinking about it now, we'll be maybe ahead of the game and figure out a plan. But,
I'm not from Maine, I'm actually from Seattle. I know it's a big city, but we actually have banned plastic bags, and now just as of July 1st, plastic cutlery and straws. And boy, was there a lot of hooting and hollering and upset, and we actually do charge a nickel for paper bag use. So, and there was a lot of upset about that, and why the hell should government have anything to do with that? It's very, very upsetting. Well, in Seattle, and understand, I'm not from Maine, and I'm not trying to tell anybody how to do this, but this is a model to consider, that the ordinance that was written was only for restaurants and grocery stores, not for any other business. And it was only for first use bags, nothing about reusable, anything, not for farmers markets or anything like that. And at first they started with just doing the brown and green plastic because that's compostable, but then people weren't bringing their plastic bags to these little recyclable things because people like me would throw them in the trash. So they said enough of that. And so they stopped doing that, and then they charged a nickel fee. Well, people got onto that pretty quick. They didn't want to pay a nickel because they forgot their reusable bags, and then people got into the habit of it. And now everybody's used to it, so it's fine, and it's now history. But the nickel fee is, the thing here is that it doesn't go to the state, the retailer gets to keep that nickel. So for, the Honorable Lori Swain, you know, if you had a paper bag, you could charge people that nickel and you could keep the money, for example. But, you know, the ordinance can be written however, but this has been successful this way. The interesting thing was that obviously plastic bags were really bad for the environment, and we're a coastal city, so it was devastating, and they discovered that the straws are actually getting into the orcas and the salmon and into the food chain, and that was obviously a big concern. But the really interesting thing was that it was being very costly for highway maintenance. And when they found out that the paper or the plastic bags, they were having to get them out of the trees and they were blowing all over the highway, by the ban, they were actually saving money on highway maintenance and trash collection. So that's just another component that they discovered in Seattle. So I just thought I'd bring that up as this is one model that you might think about.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, after watching our show today on the plastic in our oceans and stuff, and a 16-year-old kid that invented something to clean it up, I think it's actually a good idea.
Thanks. Other discussion?
Well, you know, as I voiced my opinion a year ago or 2 years ago, you know, I feel very similar to Lori, I guess, and part of, I think you mentioned some of the, I don't feel like it's something the government should be into. I agree with the recycling part of it, and I'm all for, you know, keeping them out of the side of the roads. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the individuals that put this together, and I don't have any doubt to the credibility of these facts. I mean, I'm sure that they're real. I think that we have a littering law in place, and I would rather see us direct our attention towards coming up with a way to enforce the littering law that's already in place, rather than creating a new law that prohibits those who do use plastic bags in an appropriate, reasonable manner. To me, a plastic bag is a reusable bag, which is why I quite often get a plastic bag versus a paper bag, because it's easier to carry and I can reuse it again. And I usually do reuse it, and I would imagine a lot of people probably do use them in a responsible way. But I also see an issue with a lot of the businesses here are not grocery stores. A lot of them are smaller retail stores and shops along Main Street and Parkway, where I don't believe we have as many repeat customers. So a reusable bag, maybe some people eventually will get used to coming in with bags, but a lot of people go into these stores without bags at the moment. Versus a grocery store where it's a little easier to get in that habit of I go once a week, I go in the same store, I bring the bag back. I would be a little hesitant to come up with an ordinance that only targeted a couple businesses and not all of them. I guess I feel like the government shouldn't favor one group of businesses over the other, even though, you know, is a retail outlet or a ski outlet or a sporting goods store really competing with a grocery store? Probably not, but I feel like it would be wrong to enforce an ordinance on one group, or one or two or three stores, and not on all of them in the town. But that's my thought. You know, that's how it went last time. But, and it's another cost to doing business. I mean, the cost of doing business in Maine is fairly high, and it's just another expense that has to be passed on to the consumer. Maybe they take it, maybe it wouldn't have any impact, but I think it would have an impact to some degree. So that's my thought.
I'll say one more thing. So I do have a list. I help with the spring cleanup in Bethel every year, and so he picked up along the Parkway, and he went from Dennis Auto to Mountain Martin. And I do have a list of, we kept a tally of all the types of trash we've found. So the majority of it is plastic. So I don't know if you all want a copy of that, so you know how much plastic is just on one.
biggest offenders?
Our biggest offender were plastic nip bottles. We had 204 of them in that half mile.
What was that?
We had 204 nip bottles found
Nip?
in
What's the
A
nip?
little shot.
We had 32 styrofoam cups, 31 plastic cups with lids and straws.
Where was this, Sarah?
What?
Where was it?
Between Bennett's Auto and Mallard Mart, just that stretch of.
Oh, wow.
If you give me a copy, I'll
Yeah, you
make
should
sure
do a
it's
copy.
And then just in terms of, an idea for businesses, and we would have the possibility of getting a grant from the Natural Resources Council of Maine, and, we were thinking that we could purchase reusable, bags with that, and then maybe get businesses to, support that, and just have like a community bag that's available at all the stores in town, so that you can buy that extremely cheaply, and, for almost the cost of a plastic bag, and then, right, an incentive
Yeah.
program. So, I mean, just so you know, we're not just like saying ban plastic, we do wanna help with ideas of ways to make it work for the community.
One more thing, I guess, if I can. Andrew, I guess I'm glad that you spoke on that there. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye before, and I've potentially seen you take positions at certain times where I've seen you abstain from votes, where I potentially felt there was a conflict of interest that you have, and within potentially your family or whatnot and other issues. I could maybe bring that up later as we're gonna start talking about my stuff soon here. But basically, within that, what you said, I would actually like to point out two conflicts of interest there. One, your father is the owner of one of those retail stores that you were mentioning would not have repeat users, so his overhead would potentially be higher. Two, you're a police officer, and I guess part of your job maybe is to enforce those littering laws. So when it comes down to paying more people to enforce littering laws to make that work correctly, that would be employing more police officers, right? There's gotta be a lot more, well, we're gonna pay someone to watch people litter. It ain't gonna be you, it's gonna be one of your police officer colleagues that probably has something better to do with their life than police for littering. I mean, the incentive to not litter is the $200 and $250 fine that you can see posted on every road. It doesn't stop people. How many times are you pulling people over? Most people probably don't litter when there's a cop behind them, So I mean, there's gotta be something else we
But this
can
is
do
an
here.
ordinance, an ordinance also needs to be policed.
This isn't an ordinance, this is just a conversation
Well,
about
but what
discussing
we
something
would
to be
move
built.
forward would be an ordinance, which would also need to be policed, which would either mean another cost, another responsibility to our code enforcement officer, or it would mean adding a position within the town, or something like that, part-time. I mean, we're always adding ordinances, so at some point,
We
we're gonna
are,
get to
we're
the point
going
where
over
we're
many
gonna have.
ordinances that affect many,
We're gonna have,
when you're saying that the government shouldn't get involved in this issue, I've seen the government get involved in so many issues that maybe don't have any sort of standing the way that this could potentially change the environment around us. Just like the wind towers could have potentially gotten us off of like fossil fuels, But I mean, we've gotta look at some point about the environment and where we're living beyond like the next 20 minutes to 50 years and what this place is gonna look like for our children's children.
Oh, I agree. I don't disagree with the recycling portion. I'm all for recycling and reusing those bags, which is why I said we have some laws in place. I think we ought to employ those better. And, as far as the conflict of interest, that's kind of completely absurd that I would not be able to vote on this because my father owns a business in this town that would prohibit most of us from voting on.
No, but I mean, it
I
is.
think you're right. I think you've gone to we've seen the extreme, and we know that's not the conflict of interest that we're concerned about. Lloyd, do you have anything for us? Any interest or anything to say?
We need to look into it, but I just don't know if this is the time yet for the community. It would be nice to see something brought forward to town, to see what the other townspeople have to say, but I personally, I have no issues. I reuse mine all the time.
Don, anything?
We heard rumblings, if you will, 3
this debate. We obviously last year had the same, perhaps not the same proposal, but a proposal that was to, put something before the people, and it's here again. My tendency is to believe that if they wanna write some kind of ordinance and forward something to wherever it needs to go, to us, to the ordinance review committee or something, I'm willing to make a motion to go ahead with that. I mean, we're not, it's gone far enough in my eyes at this point, so that I don't wanna make the decision, and it's for the people of Bethel to make the decision.
So are you willing to propose, that this goes forward to the ordinance review committee, or, and to say town meeting in June? Is that something you're willing to put out there, is that?
Yes, I'm willing to propose that.
If the a majority of the select board agreed with you that they wanted to move forward, how would that process work in your mind? Would you do further work on an ordinance?
Absolutely.
So what you're trying to find out is if you did further work on an ordinance, if the select board would entertain it.
Yes.
And if they vote not to do that tonight, then you would still do work on that ordinance and circulate a petition on that ordinance.
Correct.
Does the board understand this process? I don't think these two folks anyway have anything adversarial in mind. This is something that they believe in, and they understand that the select board by majority may not. But there are two things happening. There is something that they believe in, but there's also the process of government, which I think is important to learn. And so, either way, you will learn something about that by going through this process. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
So it sounds like Don is formulating perhaps a motion. But I could be, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, go ahead.
What? If we can get a motion on the floor, then we can come back to further.
As a member of the review committee, ordinance review committee, I think you have enough to try to put it forward to the committee with the help of her, to at least look at it and gather more information instead of just throwing it out the window.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the wording of the motion would be, but I would make the motion that we go forward with whatever the process need be. Obviously, they're willing to spend some time on trying to put together, an ordinance or unnecessary beginnings of one, and bring it back to us. Have us look at it, forward it on to the ordinance review committee.
What you've described, the way, is I'm new here, and I'm not totally familiar with how the ordinance committee works, but what I hear the gentleman in the back saying is that they would work with the proponents and draft and come up with an ordinance that they find satisfactory to be voted on. They would bring that back to the select board, and at that time, you would decide whether or not you want to put that on a warrant, to put before the voters for a vote. If you vote in the negative, then they have the option of circulating a petition at that time.
Yes, my suspicion is sitting here right now that they're fully committed to their goal, and if we just help them out with it, it's just gonna save them some time gathering some petitions and names and.
At this time, but perhaps not when it comes time to put it before the voters, you could still vote not to do that, at which time they could. Yeah.
So my question at that point is, do we actually need a motion that we need to vote on at this time? Or do we need to wait until we have an ordinance in front of us for that vote to matter?
Well, that's certainly up to you.
Because that would be I think we're sort of on the fence there.
I plan on being here another month or so, so I'm not sure how much you wanna listen to me, but I think a vote would be, helpful. But as Dawn expressed as well, I think, this encourages, the proponents to come up with a better defined proposal for you to review.
So we're really looking for a motion to encourage them to take this issue to the ordinance review board for development of an ordinance.
I think we ferreted it out together.
And it works for me, because I'm on the ordinance review committee. We'll work maybe a little better, I like that.
Okay, so we have a motion, and a second.
Can you read, can you say that?
Yeah, sorry. So the motion, to my understanding, and Don can interrupt, can certainly tell me if I'm wrong, is a motion to encourage Sarah and Maddie to go to the ordinance review committee and develop an ordinance to bring back to the selectmen for a vote to either go on the town warrant or not. So we have another look at it after it's been drafted and can really see what the ordinance is, and even then it would still go to the town. So is that what you understand, Don?
That, yes.
Loretta, is that good? All right, so now we have a motion on the floor. Further comment, question, or further comment?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I realize to argue against this would be like arguing against motherhood. However, I agree totally with Andy on one issue, and that is the whole issue of litter and enforcement. Enforcement is something we really need, not just for this. I mean, white goods, everything else that gets dumped out on people's property. And matter of fact, I'd like to see them accepted for nothing over at the transfer station, just to get them out of here. And also, I do reuse plastic bags, but I've also read someplace where some companies are now using plastic bags somehow in the paving process. I don't know if that's would be.
I think there are a variety of ways that people are using, I mean, it used to be tire rubber, it probably still is tire rubber.
Yeah, they do.
In the roadways, but it's not as it turns out, my understanding is it's never nearly enough. To take, the plastic bag numbers, as far as I understand it, and some of it's from watching the same movie as these guys, but some of it's from some reading and things, the numbers are astronomical. It's like, it's billions of plastic bags worldwide per year. Yeah, it's phenomenal numbers. It's hard to actually like wrap your mind around it.
The way they focus that into a place where it can be recycled would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that needs to be part of the equation as well, but I don't think the plastic bags are ever gonna be the raw material that everyone's looking for to build roads. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel
I think if we wouldn't amount to much of the deed, I mean, plastics.
Yeah.
Next time you dispose of an old car, you get a lot more plastic every year.
Any other, go ahead.
I'm brand new here. I just moved here about a month ago. But my main question would be, how are those two things mutually exclusive? Like, how would lowering the amount of new plastic coming into the system not inherently help with trash? And like, how could you not incentivize like that in lowering trash numbers as well? Like, let's clean up our streets, let's use less plastic. Would be a question I would ask in the forefront of it. Just introducing less new things into a system is going to just bring down numbers of potential new waste. But that would just be.
And I agree, and I would sort of argue the other side with Andy that We've had littering laws on the books for a long time. And whatever we've done with enforcement, and it's probably changed over time, but it seems to be a law that's pretty unenforceable. And I don't think it's because it's just, it's a very unseen crime. It's out the window, and it's very fast, and it happens all up and down the road, and on other people's properties, a lot of littering going on. Anything that we do that reduces the amount of stuff to throw out the window is probably gonna help the problem. And it's easier to enforce the trash leaving the facility in the first place than it is trying to stop every little leak in the system. The other way.
Well, do we have, like, any signs out, like, telling us, like, how much a littering fine is? I don't see really anything on Route 26, or any of the major highways saying, like, hey, $250 fine if you're caught littering. Is that, like, maybe if people at least saw it, they'd think about, doing it.
Well, I mean, we can spend more money putting up more signs and spend more money on more police to enforce what it says on those signs, or we can just remove the problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you had the tumor, you'd get rid of the tumor, right? You wouldn't like.
I agree, Peter, I agree with your assessment, and that's certainly an effective way to get rid of it, but it still is something that needs to be enforced, which I'm sure can maybe will be addressed at some point, but I mean, I'm sitting here going, are we gonna send people into these stores to make purchases and find out if they're.
You do when it comes to people selling cigarettes or alcohol, right?
You know, well, they do, but again, that's another thing where you don't see it enforced as well as it.
I mean, if this entire room went down to the IGA right now, somebody's at least gonna
It
talk
looks
about
like
the
we should,
fact that we
it looks
got a
like we
bag
should be
under the
talking about a
counter.
ban on nip bottles.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah, really.
We need a ban
I
on
mean,
nip
that would
bottles.
eliminate a lot of drinking and driving.
They tried to do it.
They tried.
Yeah, they tried to.
Failed.
they don't have nothing to
Okay, Selectmen, any other comments or questions? All right, I'd love to bring this to a vote. So, all those in favor of the motion? Yeah, you can vote. At this level, you have to vote.
Didn't wanna do anything wrong.
No, as far as, we're not, this vote is definitely not going to impact you financially. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? All right, off to the review committee you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for coming in and mentioning that was great.
All right, moving on. All right, next item on the agenda is a communication from Gabriel Stupini and request for consideration of opt-in adult marijuana referendum. Let's let these guys.
Thank you.
Move on. I know they don't seem very interested in marijuana and stuff, but all right. No, it's good.
Gabe is shy, as you folks know. And I'll just, the genesis of this was, after our last meeting, Gabe came in, we had a meeting talk, and one of the things he asked me to do on his behalf was to put this letter on your agenda and ask you to reconsider the vote.
You guys, excuse me, could you wait? Thank you.
It's okay, I'm not mad. And asked to reconsider the vote. That's what I understood our conversation was about.
Yes, I mean, in a lot of ways, the conversation definitely mentioned some other things as well, but yeah, I mean, I felt that letter that I wrote was actually prior to the last selectmen's meeting and was kind of what I wanted to say that night, but I opted not to due to my planning board thing that I had going on 2 days later. Didn't want to, I guess I just, walking into that meeting, I didn't really understand or even accept that that's what we should have been talking about there. From my understanding, it was something that had been brought up at the ordinance committee. Sorry, got an alarm going off that it is 20 to 7. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that. So the ordinance committee, at the meeting there were 2 people in the ordinance committee that had proposed something, which was the 4 referendum questions, that then within the committee had been voted against for the committee just to continue working, doing their diligence, creating the ordinances, and then those community members took it upon themselves to bring that to the town office to be put on the agenda, which then became what we voted on what you guys voted on last month. And, I mean, I found that to be incredibly obstructing. I've seen a lot of obstruction go on, or I've been told, because for me to be on that committee would be an incredible conflict of interest. I grow marijuana, I have 3 caregivers on my property, and I'm trying to expand, you know what I mean? For me to be a part of that committee would be an incredible conflict of interest, so I never even applied into it. But since I've been told a lot about what's been going on at those meetings, and it seems that there's been like a lot of obstruction at those meetings by the people that resigned from those, you know, Bob, I hate to throw you under the bus, I don't see Rick, but I would throw him under the bus as well. But, you know, basically they got to a point where they, you know, mentioned something they got voted against, and then they resigned, and then just brought it around to the selectmen as part of the agenda, completely, more or less making the ordinance committee obsolete. I mean, I know that after the last meeting, they were still left in place, but at the same time, they've been working on 4 or 5 different ordinances now for almost a year, that now potentially some of them never even see the town never even sees them due to a potential vote in November. That also doesn't mean anything other than it potentially excludes ordinances from being potentially voted on at the annual meeting next year. And I would really first like some clarification on how that process is planning on going. This vote in November, that vote in November, does that mean that adult use marijuana and those 4 aspects of it are voted yes by the town and we're gonna see those? Or, as I thought I was explained, was that then we would be re-voting on it again next year at the annual town meeting? I feel that we could eliminate a lot of this confusion that could also be going into the community due to potentially we're gonna have a public hearing to talk about these 4 referendum questions. Who knows what the community's already heard about the different aspects of adult use marijuana, none of it being what's actually written into any of these ordinances due to the fact that the ordinances have still yet to see the light of day. So I mean, the town has no idea more or less what they're gonna be voting on. We'll be voting on something that then doesn't really matter because the true vote's gonna be next year at the annual town meeting, from what I understand of it. And I guess any clarification from you guys would be great, and then I'm always down to rebuttal and continue on with my things.
Who's Katie Long?
That's my girlfriend.
That's your.
Yeah, totally. This was an email that I had circulated a couple days prior to the last meeting.
So why does it look like she wrote it for you?
We wrote it on her computer because my keyboard's broken, and so then
Okay.
she originally emailed it to me, and she potentially corrected some of my misspellings.
So you wrote this?
I did, yes.
Okay.
She typed it.
I have a few little issues with what you have in here.
Okay.
The issue with you refuse to accept the proposal and will not discuss the proposed questions pertaining to Agenda 5, Item D.
Again, this was going into last month's selectmen meeting. This was dated before that, and so I was going to say this that night at the meeting, but I didn't. And that night at the meeting, I wanted to suggest that we shouldn't have been talking about that. We should have been talking about what the ordinance committee has been doing. But yet we were talking about putting 4 referendum questions on in November. Sorry, I know it becomes a little skewed due to like I wrote it before the meeting and then well before I actually gave it to the town. And then I was only giving it to the town out of courtesy in some ways to be completely transparent with what in some ways has been discussed by many members of the community. as what I would consider obstruction and potentially collusion between certain members of the community and the powers to be, you know? I mean,
So there's collusion between the town and us? Is that what you're trying to say?
yeah, I feel like that there's been blatant obstruction and collusion to postpone this. I mean, no matter what happens here tonight, right, the process of stalling this has been going on since my timeline is December of 2016 was the first time that we discussed recreational marijuana in the town of Bethel. That meeting was largely unbeknownst to a large portion of the population of this town. It was nowhere online or anything. Regardless of that, June 2017 was the second meeting of that when I met Lloyd and a few other members here. I thought that in April, I thought that at the January meeting we had discussed potentially in May, the next meeting. I came back from Mexico, and then in April I remember coming up to the town office to pull my property lines to make sure that I didn't accidentally build too close to my neighbor's property, and in conversation with Jeff Warden, was the code enforcement at the time, he mentioned how the meeting was actually that same night. You know, this was about 3:30 in the afternoon. I called Nick and John and Tom, who I don't see here tonight, but a few other people, and there were about 8 or 9 of us here at that meeting that night, and we were not able to find it documented anywhere within any form within the town. And at that meeting, there was the talks about potentially putting a moratorium on this. At that point, the 8 of us that were here spoke up about our feelings on it, and that was when the town, the selectmen opted to move towards an ordinance committee for this, which after then multiple months of, I want to say it was August or something, when the announcement was actually made for the ordinance committee. I was at the meeting that night. It overlapped with the wind ordinance meeting. I remember Rick Whitney specifically making or what did he say? Specifically, the specific word, I don't know, it was about putting Wayne Gallant on the committee though, because the town had selected the 10 members of the committee. He was disappointed that Wayne hadn't been put on the committee. At that point, Andrew actually spoke against his father in some ways, being like, well, we picked the committee out of who we did. Maybe Wayne's in a different spot now than he was then. I know you abstained from the vote because potentially you would have been, you know, not wanting to go against your father, because that could have potentially been a fight over dinner or something like that, which would have sucked. But anyways.
I have one thing to add to this. The most important thing I got out of that was that on that meeting in April, they decided to go with a committee ordinance group instead of the 4 questions on the vote. That was the decision that night. They proposed questions to go directly to the public or a committee, and they went with the committee.
Right.
So then they got reverted back to 4 questions.
Right, and after a year's worth of work that the committee did, I mean, Christine put different moratorium aspects that were going to at first affect recreational marijuana. Then the final one that got proposed and voted on was only affecting caregiver storefronts after. But all of that becomes like massive stalling of this process, because the people that don't want it to happen, all they need to do is just stall the process for the rest of their life. You know what I mean? It matters to the people that want to be a part of this, like the time frame that we would like to see things done in. You know, and at this point, after the ordinance committee's done over a year's worth of work, now we're back to voting on 4 questions that the town isn't even understanding of. Maybe they're going to have one public forum where they're going to hear about this stuff 2 weeks before the election, if they're available for that meeting. I mean, I sometimes I get lost for like how corrupt I see.
Okay, so you guys put together an ordinance committee to vote on ordinances, okay? So,
No, we put together a marijuana
Marijuana
committee
to discuss
as more of a
marijuana.
fact finding. And
okay,
the committee itself is.
okay, can I speak?
Yeah,
Okay.
come on.
First of all, we're voting, let's say they vote yes on all of them, we have to vote again on them in June. Why we, on the ordinances? The ordinance committee is almost done these ordinances. Why don't we just do one vote in June? Why are we doing 2 votes? I don't get this, I really don't. And, hold on, I wanna bring something else up too. If it does go to a June vote, regardless, if you vote in November and it goes to a June vote, we've had several discussions with Dawn to where we think this would have to go on a vote on June 12th, where the whole town would get to vote on something this important rather than a town meeting vote. Is that not what we discussed on, and we agreed that how it should be?
Yeah, what I said was I could look into the fact that maybe that could be put on a referendum.
As a warrant, right? As a warrant, correct? As a referendum.
So,
That's what we're voting on in November. Why don't we wait until the ordinances are ready so that people know what they're voting on and they vote on it as a warrant in June? One time, done.
So my understanding and my understanding, and I'm not gonna say it's, I've looked at everything all the time, but sort of paid attention since the beginning, was that the goal of putting out the questions was so that the ordinance review committee, not the marijuana committee, but the ordinance review committee that oversees our ordinance, wouldn't have to waste a lot of time developing 4 ordinances to come to the town vote. They could either, maybe they will have to do all 4, depending on how the vote goes in November, or maybe they'll only have to do 1 or 2 or 3. Who knows? I don't know what the town people of Bethel are gonna say when they're polled all together. And that's really my only understanding of it, was give if there are ordinances that don't need to be written and reviewed by the ordinance review committee, then
why did we make an ordinance committee to begin with?
it was never an ordinance committee. I don't believe that was ever in the name of the committee. It was the marijuana
We
committee.
got members of that committee right
Yeah,
here,
the ad hoc
so.
committee on marijuana.
To bring recommendations.
Really, that was it. And so, I don't wanna,
What's on your website is the marijuana review ordinance. The marijuana ordinance committee.
The charter
It's on there,
speaks,
Ashton. I just don't know why we're voting twice.
the charter, as to what we were supposed to do, speaks to us developing language and ordinance that we could present to the ordinance review committee, who could tweak it to make it fit with our government, and then pass it on to you folks to pass on it, and then we were gonna take a vote on it. And however it happened, I don't know, collusion's a strong word, but however it happened, you totally had no input from the ordinance review committee when you went with the 4 questions, which were, I don't know, decided on like 2 weeks, 3 meetings, I mean, a year ago, probably.
It was.
So and I understand how it can happen, but I think it's wrong.
Basically, without the marijuana committee finishing their work, the ordinance review committee has to start it all over again now. But if they put together those 4, and then we look at it and go, no, geez, that ain't gonna work, but this is gonna work, let's give it to the selectmen now, these are our recommendations, then you put the 4 to the people that they're written. What you're asking them now, they have no idea, but neither do I.
So the ordinance,
So I see what they've come up with.
Can I talk for a second? They haven't been told not to do anything. In fact, I think our instruction was to continue working, was our instruction. The point of the questions is to try to give them guidance, so they know what to focus on, and then therefore the ordinance review.
But they actually said they didn't want that, and they were totally fine with working. We just saw you talk to them.
go ahead.
What you're saying, Andy, I think that would make sense a year ago.
And I think
But-
I tried to say that a year ago.
Well, I think many people did, and that didn't work out. But I need to say that if this committee wasn't supposed to create ordinances, we were completely misled. And I don't think that was purposeful. I think there's been a misunderstanding a lot of places and breakdowns in communication. And, I mean, you don't even want. I've been working for 5 weeks to write you guys a letter because I care about you. I think you're all fine people individually. I know some of you are, and I'm guessing you all are. But as a group, this has been really confusing. And I just learned now that this 4-question thing came up. I never knew that. And then they decided to do a committee. But for all practical purposes, Dawn has been to our meetings. We've talked about ordinances for a year. Christine knew that we were creating ordinances, that we were told there's boilerplates, I guess they call them out there, and we've been working hard. And we tried and tried and tried every which way but loose to come up with a way to survey, and could not come up with any accurate way to survey and get everyone's opinion. So we decided to do our best to create ordinances, give them to the committees. I'm glad to hear what you're saying, because I'm so confused about the ordinance review committee, to know that they make ordinances and then they review their ordinances. So anyway, we were led to believe that we were to make ordinances. We have 2 ready. We're keeping them to finish the other 2. They're not going to be like rocket science. They're based on the state law. I'm just beside myself from hearing that, and I didn't confer with Gabe with what he was going to talk about tonight, but in my letter I was going to ask you to please reconsider. It's not going to save us any time. We're about done. We'll be done before the vote, but we know they can't be reviewed and put in the vote. I can't speak for the committee, but I think we resigned ourselves that it wouldn't be till next June. So we'd have plenty of time to educate. You'd had plenty of time to review and go back and forth. And I can't for the life of me figure out how this happened. I don't blame Rick. Your father is smart. He's tenacious. He believes in what he believes in. And he planted seeds and people listened, and I get that. But when I try to find out how this exactly came about, I mean, I avoided Lori. I bought her corn at the grocery store because I didn't think it was right for me to approach people individually. I do Don because I see him. I go to the bank. I don't ask Lloyd, so what's happening? And I finally sent Peter Southam an email because I'm desperate to understand. I want you to make me understand. And I have defended the select board and the town manager, Christine at the time, many times when people have said they don't want these businesses in Bethel. And I have
to defend me too.
I will. I don't know you well enough, but I defend you anyway. But I said, it's a complex issue. It's not. This is new. This is historic. It's brand new territory. People are afraid of things, trying to learn, and so there's been a lot of floundering. And I think Don has been doing the best he can to support us and then be part of you. There's a lot of strong dynamics in this town of friendships that they can't be avoided. There's like this enmeshment of things that we can't avoid because it's a small town. So it makes sense. But sometimes it's not good. And even though I say I admire Rick's his tenacity to stand up in front of the select board and say that the committee that he's on should be disbanded, and then say that his goal was to have an up or down vote. I mean, I know this because he's honest about it, and I would say this to him. To say this in front of the select board and not have anyone even think that was odd, I was just baffled. I don't create a lot of expectations, but I guess I held the board as a whole to a higher expectation for someone to say, gee, that's unfortunate that that's your goal. How can you be a very constructive committee member? But no, no one batted an eye that I could see. And so it was just I felt so beat up after that meeting, felt beat up after the last one, because it feels like when we try to ask how this came about, I know Don is out and about. He sees people at Mallard Marty says he sees people at the post office. People talk to him. But what about the people that you selected to learn about this and to present? We were under the impression we were supposed to present ordinances. I'll tell you, I didn't fill that bag up not thinking I was presenting ordinances. I came up with a survey last year. That was a little more than what people wanted, but we realized that wouldn't work. And I am just really baffled now to have it said that we're not supposed to be making ordinances. We have 2 more left. I don't understand why, if those are done and everybody can start reviewing them and they can go to the Mary Costigan and again, I'm sorry, but you pay a lot of money for her, and get them to a place where then we can educate the people on it. I wished, Pat has suggested that the committee meet with the select board just one-on-one, so you can ask us questions instead of in a forum like this. I think there's been some misunderstandings. Lori admitted to being misled. I feel bad for her, and I can't imagine why somebody would do that, but it happened. And I can't imagine that didn't persuade her whole persona when the committee's been around. I mean, even though I defended, I got to a place where I felt like just the way that we are interacted with at select board meetings that we've attended feels like we're either like some enemy or some entity that you wished you hadn't created, or that, you know, we're doing something against you when we're trying to help you. There's videos, you could watch them, and I learn a lot more in the videos than when I'm in the moment, because I get passionate about it. I care about you all. I want you to know that people walk in and say, they don't want these businesses. I've heard people say that. I try to say it's complicated, but I've gotten to a place where I understand why they say it. If you don't want to portray that, then I don't know what has to be different. Maybe I've said enough so I don't have to give you all that paperwork. That's just from 4 weeks, and I'm exhausted.
I'm not on the committee, but I've sat in on most of the committee meetings. And from the get-go, I thought that the committee was being asked to create ordinances so that the people in town would know what they were voting on. And the committee asked again and again, is there money for education? No. Can we have a general meeting? No. Is there money for education? No. But our previous town manager kept calling the lawyer and spending your money, our money. And all of a sudden, bang, there's going to be a referendum vote with a 1-page explanation that is as ambiguous as it was a year ago for people who don't have a clue. This committee has put in tons of hours reading a boatload of stuff. They've recorded the meetings. If you've watched them, then you've learned. If you've read the stuff, you've learned. The state was in effect holding it up because they were waffling. They're done waffling. This is something that's going to happen when the state of Maine voted for recreational marijuana, and the town of Bethel did. The whole premise of Maine doing it was to keep it as small businesses, or at least some portion of it. If you continue, and sitting where I sit, I would say you're trying to block it. You've already lost. Gotta get some more passionate about this than I thought I was. I really don't have a dog in this fight. But you've already lost people in Bethel who are committed citizens, or were young and planning on being committed citizens, because they see the obstruction going on. They've bought property in West Paris. I know of another one who is going to South Paris. Those are jobs that are just moving away. In manufacturing and cultivation, testing, I don't know how many jobs that are going to be there. Storefronts. I mean, if you don't want jobs, say so. But it's going to happen. And it's not going to be the little guys that are already here. It's the big guys. There's somebody who's got his sights on Bethel. Bethel is, you know, we're right on the gateway.
There are so many people that are buying up this area.
Quiet, not done yet. You're already losing people going elsewhere. but it is going to happen. You're gonna have marijuana in town, you already have it. Thinking you're gonna stop it, forget it. But you're gonna have retail here, you're gonna have cultivation here, you're going to have manufacturing here, and if you keep screwing with it, it's gonna be the big guys that are gonna have it here, and you know where that money's going? Out of town. If you allow the people who are already here to have a part of it, that money will stay in town. But if you wanna keep having the cultivators, and especially the processors and the manufacturing, go out of town, just kiss those jobs goodbye. Come on.
Bob?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. Gabe certainly indicated that my getting off the committee slowed up the committee. There's no way in hell that should have slowed up the committee a bit.
No, you being on the committee,
What?
you being on the committee slowed.
Okay, well, I got off it, so I helped you.
Sure, other
So what
than
the hell
that,
are
at
you
the same
complaining
time,
about?
at the same time.
Okay, you shut up, let me talk.
Yeah,
I'm
let Bob
talking an
talk,
awful
and
lot.
then we'll come back again.
So, anyway, and I think I think by putting in front of the town, the votes that the selectmen have put up, I think gives some direction. I think that was intended to give more direction. And as far as I'm concerned, this thing here, that's slanderous to more than one or two people. And to say that Rick Whitney was guilty of obstruction in conclusion.
It's on the recorded statements of what he said, so I mean, it's not like.
That what, who said?
What Rick Whitney said, it's on the recorded statements and from the ordinance committee meetings, everything's been recorded, we're being recorded
That's right.
right now.
I'd take it off, but I've never seen him in meetings I was at where he was obstructing, and, you know, he had opinions, they were strong opinions, there's no question about it, just like you do. Like the majority of the committee does, that's the way it is. But, it's, you know, in my opinion, I think it should go to the voters, and I think it was a unanimous vote to send it to the voters.
Oh, well, there was an
What?
I wasn't there.
I think the question is what gets sent to the voters.
Yeah.
If you have all this work prepared, that's a little more detailed.
No, I meant the questions that were prepared by the selectmen.
During referendum questions?
Yep.
To be voted on in November?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but those were the same questions, though, that you and Rick both proposed at the ordinance committee, and the ordinance committee opted to not move that direction. And then you and Rick both resigned from the ordinance.
Oh,
committee.
you better go back and listen to your minutes, because
They vote,
I
you
guess I
guys
will.
voted on it.
I will. But I mean, I didn't send this to the paper, so we don't have to be worried about anything, you know, publicly coming about it. I believe my freedom of speech.
You've given it to the selectmen, it's a public
Yeah,
document.
I think we could go on with this all night, I don't think it's gonna change, the procedure at this point, that's, as far as I understand it, and my understanding is, so my understanding was more information, better, from the town. My continued understanding is that the course we're following right now, while it might be a little more cumbersome, is gonna wind up with the same timing and the same vote in the end.
Is that more expensive?
Well, perhaps, and
You're already spending money on this.
And we might not get the same vote in the end, because right now we're gonna have a preliminary vote that could potentially take certain things off the table to be even voted on next year due to probably lack of information and education going to the town that actually.
Can I speak for a second? There's been, my last name's been mentioned an awful lot, and I've done pretty good to keep myself quiet over here, so. But I'm not gonna stay quiet all night. So we mention education is brought up all the time. So I just want you guys to know what my perception of the committee was supposed to be, because I do think there's a little miscommunication here, which has led to this whole thing. My perception of the committee was more of a fact-finding committee that was supposed to represent close to the 50% difference that we saw in the town vote when Bethel authorized it. That's what we were trying to do. We're not trying to sway one way or another. It seems like the committee took a slightly different approach than I had anticipated it. Now, maybe it's not the wrong approach. I'm not sure of the wording that you guys referred to earlier. If that wording's in there, then I misunderstood that when we, I can take responsibility for part of that misunderstanding. But the term education gets used a lot here, and I'm gonna tell you all my personal opinion on marijuana so that you understand where I come from. Because you might agree with some of what I have to say. You probably won't disagree with a portion of it too. But me personally, I'm not one. I don't care if you want to go home and you want to eat a brownie, smoke a joint, or whatever after work. It's what you do. That's fine with me. I don't care. What concerns me is the commercial side of it. What concerns me is the plants and the smells and the lack of. We talk about jobs. We don't have good tax infrastructure at the moment for this. A lot of times this money has to be kept out of the bank because of the federal government not catching up with state government, which is a concern of mine. A lot of this money can't go into banks, is what I'm told from people who work in the industry, which leads me to believe that some of it doesn't get reported properly in taxes. And there are other businesses that do the same thing. There are, okay, so that's good to know, okay?
We all have an account.
But we talk about education a lot, and marijuana is just, in my mind, it's just like any drug, alcohol, or any of the hard stuff. There are good sides to it and there are bad sides to it. And when I sit here from the committee, I don't, with the exception of 2 people who are now off the committee, I don't feel like we get this is a good, this is a bad to it. I feel like the committee's approach to education has been educate people on why it's good, not educate people on some of the bad things to it too. And I think that
everybody already knows all the bad things to it. They've been doing that, preached to them for
I
80 years.
would disagree with that. And just like we learned new good things about it, because there are good things. If you had had this conversation 20 years ago, I don't think you'd have found a lot of people who said there were good things. There are good things about it, and I'll give you that.
Probably did have this conversation 20 years ago.
Well, I'll give you the fact that there are some good things to it, but there are some bad things to it too. And I don't feel like when the committee says they want to educate people on it, I don't feel like it's here's a good, here's a bad kind of thing.
I mean, you're not letting them though, so it's hard to see what they would say.
We do, as far as, and I would like to speak to this a little bit. I don't want to give this too much credit because I feel like everything in this is false. Absolutely no obstruction, collusion, I don't even know where that comes from. Yes, people are allowed to say their opinions, and some, there's going to be opinions very much for it, very much against it. My opinion probably comes somewhere closer to the middle than you guys might think. I can assure you that I have disagreed with my father on numerous occasions, and I have still managed to survive and eat my dinners. We certainly don't agree with on this issue wholeheartedly, but that's just the way it is. I don't feel like this is really a fair thing. I don't think that 2 people can hold up a Democratic committee. 2 or 3 people can't hold up a Democratic committee. It should be operating by majority vote, I would imagine. And I mean, that's how we operate. And I can't hold 4 people up if they vote and vice versa. So I think it's unfair to say that they're obstructing or their opinion is different than some, and we have to listen to all of them. And Jewel, please don't feel like you can't approach any of us.
I know. I never have.
Well, don't feel like that. We all get excited about certain issues. I get worked up about things. We all have things that are important to us. But if we walk out that door, feel free to say hi or anything like that.
I would as a citizen, but not as a committee member. That's what I felt. I didn't feel it was fair to any of you to single you out and say, well, I think that.
First off, don't ever do that again.
Well, Dawn, I beat up poor Dawn. He hears me because I want to be straight with everybody. I don't want to be venting in the dairy aisle at the grocery store and of my frustration, which I have done and I will continue to do. But, and a couple more things, I'll talk fast. I did find a charge, and Lori, you and I did speak way before the committee started, what we had been, and you were very excited about the balance of what you thought that you had pegged. I still think you people did a good job. And Bob told me he left. He was thinking about leaving because he didn't feel he knew enough about it. That's what he said. Rick said it was hard for him to work on stuff he doesn't believe in, and I get that. I just don't know why he kept trying to. And we didn't I don't know, sometimes when people said stonewall, if we disagreed and people voted differently, that's not, I know, it was maybe when you were misled, you said at the last meeting, the select board meeting, that 2 people had resigned because they didn't feel they were allowed to have their opinions. They had their opinions. We just didn't agree sometimes. Sometimes we did. And I tried I'd weigh them out, but this might be ridiculous, but maybe if it will make you feel any more like you had created a balanced committee, if I had to bet, and I haven't asked, I know from a few people, but if I had to bet how many people on that committee, the original 11, voted against the legalization of marijuana in 2016, I would say the majority. And even though 3 people have left, I would still bet the majority of members voted against it. And to me, that makes me feel like these people are going to be mindful and reasonable and careful about what they're trying to put together. And it's not just going to be loosely thrown out. We've researched a lot. And unfortunately, like, I don't know when you are with the committee, if those feelings I was feeling are real, because someone can tell me, like, I looked mad and I could be thinking about caterpillars, I don't know, can't really tell. But other things, like what people told Lori about Bob's feelings and Rick's feelings, that the committee was unbalanced, so therefore not fair, so therefore, that's why he wanted to dissolve it. But also, and this is nothing against media, it's not on purpose, it's not even thought of, I don't think. I just thought of it recently. When it says pro-marijuana people, that's not, to me, what this is about. This is about businesses and land rights and creating something for the voters to vote on. It doesn't really, to me. Thank you.
Okay, it's really hard for me to try to keep my composure here, but, number one, Andrew, you keep on saying that when we say we want to educate, it's not to educate the good or the bad, it's to educate what we're working on as far as ordinances. There's 4 different categories. People need to know what those 4 categories are and what they involve. And also, we have created, with the help of Sarah, we have created a map that shows them where it's not going to be in the town of Bethel, and then includes all of downtown. And these things the voters need to know. These are things that we're trying to educate the people about, not whether it's right or if it's wrong. That's not our purpose. And the charter, or the charge, whatever you want to call it, says to work as an ad hoc committee to collect information from the residents of Bethel in order to formulate changes in the code for the town in regards to a marijuana policy that has pending legislation in state level. I don't know why you're saying that we were not supposed to make up ordinances.
Sorry, maybe I misspoke, or maybe I didn't fully understand it, but.
The next one's about regulations.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, so I didn't have the code, I didn't have that in front of me, so
Would you
maybe I
like to see it?
misspoke. No, I believe you. But thank you for clearing, I think on the education piece, thank you for clarifying that, that was.
Okay, and that's the reason why we as a committee asked that we could meet with your board on a one-on-one basis so that we could clear the air and get on the same page. That's why we asked to do that. and we would really appreciate it if we could.
I got something real quick, before I know you wanna move on, but, I think what we're all looking for here, including the marijuana committee, is we would like the vote to be moved to June on the 12th, so that the ordinances are complete, so that your town voters know what they're voting for. Like the medical marijuana ordinance vote, there was a lot of people, probably 30 of them I talked to, in that room that would have voted not for they voted for the medical marijuana ordinance on the storefronts because you guys didn't have an ordinance, so they didn't know what it was. Is stuff allowed downtown, or is it out of town? I mean, people need to know what they're voting for, not just, this is a definition of the state's things. That's not, okay, it can't be in town, it's 1,000 feet from the school. People don't know this stuff. They just don't. And another thing I just want to bring up with Andrew. Andrew, I flew a drone, I got real satellite video. There's more marijuana being grown around here than you could ever imagine. When you wanna talk smell, you guys are giving Gabe a hard time about smell. There's a 5-acre hemp farm 1 mile from his house that smells, I can smell it for miles, and it's legal. So it's coming, guys, I mean.
I understand that, and I'm sure that there's.
It is.
I know there's
I mean,
marijuana all
now you
over
got
the place.
200 and something little
But
shot
that's-
bottles laying on a mile stretch of highway, and you guys are worried about marijuana? Give me a break.
Well,
That's what you should be worried about.
But you just made a good point with the odor and stuff, that's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay,
you know,
well,
and if
like
we had
Gabe
done
and
a-
his permit, he's gone
if we
over
had
and
done a
above
better
with
job-
over $80,000 filtration.
If we had done a better job with medical marijuana, we may not have that issue, and that's just what we're trying to do.
I'd like to see a motion from somebody to remove this thing, so that everyone's gonna re-vote it on the 12th, so that people have a chance to vote on, know what they're voting on.
On a complete ordinance.
Yeah.
Right now,
know
they're
what
not
voting
voting on a
for.
complete ordinance, they're
I mean,
voting on a
if-
little snippet.
And if
They
the
need to
ordinance-
vote on the entire ordinance, so they know exactly what
I
it
mean,
means.
Bethel, the state voted 49% to 51. Bethel, if you look at it, is over, that's a 2% gap on marijuana, yes or no? Bethel was over a 10% gap for it. What, they blew the state away. I mean, look at the numbers.
Does anyone want to propose a change?
I'm looking for somebody here too.
Maybe David could explain what reconsideration is. Basically, as I understand it, in my years here is, we all voted in the affirmative at the last meeting.
She was misinformed.
What's that?
Lori was misinformed by a bunch of. When she voted, she was misinformed, were you not?
The board has got some business.
Okay,
to do,
that's fine.
and I think the board has been good about listening, and the things that I've heard have been useful and helpful, but to continue the discussion isn't gonna be any more useful or beneficial to anybody, so. I believe that the motion to reconsider has to come from someone who voted in the affirmative. I think that's about the only requirement that I'm aware of.
As I recall, it has to be at the next regular meeting, as I recall.
Which this is.
Yeah, which this is. Okay. That's all I wanted to make sure that everybody understood.
I don't have a horse in this race. It is my duty to tell you that we have committed, as you voted, we've committed money to rent the machine and to create ballots. I do believe that if it's your will, we can stop that. I mean, it's up to you.
She already ordered the ballots.
She ordered the ballots.
And she's already rented the machine.
She's rented the machine, but do you think that the warrant for that hasn't been posted, has it?
No.
So you would waste the money that we've spent on the ballots and renting of the machine. I'm not the clerk, so you know, I may get this wrong, and I try my best to get it right, but I think you could just not post that vote and not have it before the voters. That's what I think. I'm not the clerk. You're the deputy clerk. If you think, well, if they haven't posted the warrant for this, then then it's not an official election until they post that warrant.
Correct. But you've already spent it.
You already spent the money.
That's what it's coming down to,
Yeah.
my opinion.
But we did that because, in fairness to us, we did that because that was the vote to do that.
You're gonna spend it again anyway.
That's right.
Yeah, spend it next June.
It doesn't matter, you're gonna spend it again, twice.
That'll
I'm
be a
struggling
regular-
here, working for these 5 people. I can't work for all of you folks at the same time.
So the question, Peter, for the board ultimately is there anybody here who wishes to make a motion to reconsider?
That's exactly right. Would anyone like to make a motion to reconsider?
So what are we motioning to reconsider? The 4
Send-
opt-in
Yes,
questions that we,
sending the vote to the voters in November.
instead of sending them in November, we'll send them in June?
No.
In June, we would ostensibly opt to send ordinances, so it wouldn't, as far as timing goes, it doesn't matter a whole lot. One way or another, no matter what, well, it does matter a little bit. In one case, we vote in November, and that is reflected in ordinance changes that get voted in June. So in
Okay.
other words, say for example, the town of Bethel, the people of Bethel in November vote yes on cultivation and yes on retail, but no on testing and no on manufacture. So say that's a hypothetical vote. Then, based on that, the ordinance review committee would be working on an ordinance to then allow retail and cultivation, and probably wouldn't work on an ordinance to allow testing and manufacture. So they'd only, and so that way in June, voters would only see 2 ordinance changes, which they could vote on. What we're being asked to consider is to scrap the November vote and just develop 4 ordinances that all appear in June as for the vote of the town to be either accepted or rejected.
Now,
So in other words, we're in effect voting twice under the current system, once under what we're being asked to consider here. But in either case, the vote would happen in June. So we're not slowing down the process one way or the other, according to my understanding.
now, Pat,
Yes.
wasn't there, the other night at the meeting, wasn't there more than 4 ordinance?
No, we have 4, 2
You
are,
got
2 are
4?
completed. So our work is still, we were told that we still should continue our work.
Right.
So what he's saying is, we wouldn't have to work on those 2 ordinances or whatever, however, an amount doesn't get passed. But all of them will be done before the November, we will be turning in all 4 ordinances before the November vote, if it goes that way. But they will not be ready to be addressed at the November vote. But all 4 ordinances will be completed, so we have gained nothing as far as helping us save time.
Right, in either case, the final vote
We were told that we would continue with our work, which we have done.
would be in June.
Peter, it is the question though, if, let's say, 3 of the advisory votes, if that's the correct term, pass and 1 doesn't, would that vote still go before the voters in June? Is that your understanding?
My understanding was that if the
Anything gets
if the
voted
November
as
vote
negative.
was a negative, then that ordinance would cease to be developed and not wind up in the ballot in June. That's my current understanding. That's, but I'm not sure, then I'm not sure where the petition process leaves us.
Right, I was gonna say they could petition one if it was a case where 2 or 3 got voted in and 1 or 2 didn't, they could petition it again and we'd be going through.
Right.
It would just, that particular one would be.
I got a quick question for the
Right.
town manager.
Can I just clarify?
I hope it's one I can
Can I just make
answer.
one clarification? The November vote is for a referendum vote for the voters of Bethel to decide if they want any of those 4 categories in the town of Bethel.
Well,
So
for
whatever.
individual votes.
You're right, exactly. So whatever they do choose to have legalized in Bethel, in June, they will be re-voting on the ordinance itself for that category.
Correct.
Okay, okay,
That's my understanding.
all right, okay.
My question before you guys vote on this, can we go get enough signatures to change this to June? The town?
That's a timing question. As
I
far as I'm
can have him
concerned.
tomorrow, wasn't he, he's what, 136, correct? Okay, thank you.
I know nothing about the marijuana thing, except that I think that we all should vote on all 4 things in November, that we shouldn't cut the public out of voting on all the things after they've been working so hard to get them.
So I think the question is, what's actually, the wording of what's being voted on in November versus specific ordinance changes. What's being voted on in November is not written ordinances. It's an advice, it's a vote that would inform ordinance development, but it's not law.
They will not
No,
see
but I
new
thought if
ordinances,
you
they're not gonna
voted
vote for it.
against something, it would not be brought up again in June.
Right, it won't be.
And I think that they should all be brought up in June.
Yeah. She doesn't know what she's voting on, that's what she's asking.
I like to know what I'm doing.
Who's the
Yeah.
committee members here tonight? Stand up, please.
Sure. Stand up, guys. Take a bow.
Stretch.
All right, now, from you
Four.
4 that are right here, right now, I want to know what you think
As far as,
for this opt-in thing.
I think it's only fair that the voters get to vote on the ordinances and not just the subject.
Okay. Julie?
I agree with that.
Thank you.
I think that Dawn is the one that has talked most about this and coming up with this thought. And I think he did it before realizing that we were gonna be done our ordinances. And I think he thought we wanted to have them done so they could be voted on in November. So, but we realized we had some interference and that didn't happen, so we resigned ourselves to that, I believe. But I think he was trying to give the voters something from what it sounds like with him, that people were asking him, but I think it's just, to vote in November, I think it's just adding complexity to something that's already complex enough.
Okay.
And that we should just go with them in June, that's what I thought.
Donna?
June, definitely June. I don't think that anybody can vote if they don't know what they're voting for, I don't think.
John?
And it's not just yes or no, do you want it or not? I mean, I think an informed person is in our best interest. Things like, do you want a retail store? Okay, yes or no. However, we're working on it. It's gonna be 1,000 feet from a school or a public park. You know, there's certain guidelines that we have. It's not just willy-nilly, do you want it or no? Well, gee, I don't know. If I have it, what's it gonna mean? So, if they have the ordinances, they'll be able to see what it means.
Okay, now,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I had a train of thought here.
Thank you for that question.
So if we decided that we would change the warrant, the referendum rather, so that you guys would have more time to write the ordinances, get them to the ordinance review board, get them to us,
Get them to the attorney.
and the attorney afterwards, yes, we can't forget that part.
Right.
And then it would go before the voters in June.
After our hearing.
Completely,
After-
completely finished, yes.
Okay.
But as a referendum,
Yeah,
the
but
day,
now,
day before the town meeting,
Yeah,
as a referendum, so everyone can vote. That's what we agreed on. Well, that's what we want.
That's what
we
we
want to
talked
vote.
about.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It
I
doesn't,
just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, so now we need to address whether or not one of us wants to bring that back.
in other words, does any of you guys wish to reconsider the vote from last meeting and make a motion to reconsider the vote from last meeting on whether to put these questions on the November ballot.
Okay. Well, since we have so much discussion, I think that I will make that motion to reconsider the vote for those 4 questions. The referendum for those 4 questions.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
All right, we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the selectmen?
The discussion that I would have again is, it is my firm belief, and it is not a belief out there, I know. My whole rationale in this has been that it is much easier to inform the public about the questions. These are questions that have been developed by the lawyer and come from the state. And to inform them of developing ordinances and to explain in some short fashion what is going to be put into an ordinance. Like I've told the committee, I've sat through public hearings on ordinances, and you quite often see people get up and leave because you have 3 pages of sometimes there are deletions and stuff, sometimes there are explanations that people wanna make, and you have somebody on one side of the aisle, somebody over here, and I don't think it gets, I think it could be explained much better just the way we've laid it out here. In definition, some maps that have already been produced, that could be published, laid out, and as the committee's already said, they've got their work pretty well done. If they get it pretty well done, it's not hard to disseminate what could be out there in the public, for the public to hear, so.
But what if they've worked on 2 ordinances already, they've got it all written, and what if the town decides, the town people decide they don't want those 2 that they've already written? Then that scraps their work.
That would be the only true waste of time.
That's what democracy does, when you vote no on something, it goes away.
And but all 4 of them will
It's
be
an unfinished
completed by
product.
then.
Right.
They will be completed.
Mhm.
So the
On our
town
end.
is welcome to vote the ordinances up or down.
Right.
Absolutely.
When they become
But
ordinances.
they wouldn't be, I think, through the ordinance committee and a hearing.
Correct.
They've gotta
Yeah.
become ordinances first.
That's all
No, I
should
understand.
happen before November.
So I have a question, I guess. If they have all 4 ordinances done by November, can they be made public as proposals and attached with those
No.
existing questions?
No,
Because they have to go in front of the other 3, the other 3 groups.
boards, so they wouldn't be ready
Yeah,
for.
so
We
you're
will
saying
have
there's
them
no way
turned in
if
by
fall
then.
into the ordinance.
Right, you guys will
ready
have
for
them
November.
turned in by then. but-
We've sanctioned the committee to do this work. They're going to complete their work, they're gonna hand it to us. It's obviously not gonna come to us at this meeting, it's gonna come to us, at an October meeting. We're gonna look at it, and I, for one, certainly am not going to read through 4 ordinances at one sitting at this table. I'm gonna take them home with me and read through them. We're gonna decide, from our part, does it look complete enough to send on to the ordinance review committee? The ordinance review committee gets them. They probably aren't gonna meet 4 times in late October, early November to put their thought in comparison as to what's been written and try to mate it up with all our other ordinances that are in a big blue Bible here that we work with. So you aren't gonna have sanctioned ordinances if we have them by January. I would be greatly surprised.
Right, so why should we be voting on them in an idea in November? The
So-
only way that they're,
Well, that's, again,
let's just-
in my
we have
opinion,
some
it's
stuff to hash
easier to
out here, so-
explain. It's as simple as that.
So I guess I still agree with Don, I still think we should stick with the old way, I think there are a lot of good points here. I'm not gonna be terribly upset if the vote changes, myself, I mean, I do think, I still like the 4 questions, but, you know, I guess it's probably, you know, it's gonna end up there one way or another.
Andrew, you abstained from the vote for the 4 questions last month. You were the only seat that abstained from that vote.
I don't think I was, I don't think I was.
No, I was not here.
You were not, no, but he abstained and didn't actually vote.
it was unanimous.
Four, no.
Yeah.
We were all in favor of doing.
Sorry about that.
Lloyd, do
Sorry
you have
about that.
anything else to add to the discussion? You know, my personal take is, I don't really want to undermine the work of the committee, because they've been working a long time, and I appreciate that. And perhaps I didn't fully understand where this November vote fit into the whole procedure. And I think people need to vote on things, but I think having an actual ordinance with the wording in front of people is the fairest way to do this. So, and I feel, you know, maybe I've not completely understood all the procedural issues all the way through. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on them now, and I apologize for not maybe getting there earlier. Anything else from anyone on the select board?
Just the question for the town manager, I guess, I was not sure when we talked about, next June being able to have this as a referendum question. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
You can, all right.
That's when you elect your select board members by ballot.
Exactly.
You're already set up to have a ballot vote, so just have a yes or no on the questions. You won't be able to write out the whole ordinance, but you'll have to do it by question, somehow making the total wording of the ordinances available to people. But
You'll have public hearings on, once they get to it.
you'll have hearings prior to the meeting, to the vote in June, and all, but you won't vote on, however, one of the ordinances that you have done, how many pages is it, do you think?
I have it right here, wait a minute.
Right, so that's not gonna, so it's important, but it doesn't,
There's a lot of boilerplate in it. I don't mean to interrupt, but there's a lot of whereas and all that. You might be able to condense it to the salient points.
Somehow the question will have to be
Perhaps.
5.5 pages.
summarized. There will be a summary question that people will vote yes or no on. They won't have that whole thing in front of them. However, it will be available to anyone who wants it.
And they will have a copy of the setback match also?
I would assume, I won't be here, I'll be in Norway in my chair.
Oh, okay.
But,
We'll come and visit.
I mean, all of that, anything that was in that would of course be publicly available. I'm guessing we would try to do something like have that available at the polling place, but it's not gonna be on the ballot. So I'm thinking what you're gonna see on the ballot is going to be quite similar to what you're seeing on these November questions.
Absolutely be the same as I understand it.
Yeah, but you still got the information.
Yeah,
but if you-
Correct, and the information would exist, the question, the specific, people who wanted to,
exactly.
which is everybody, but we know that's not everybody, would have the ability to go and specifically look at the
But they would be
language
done,
in the ordinance.
and you would also have a public hearing on them prior to the vote, correct? So people get a better idea what they're voting on.
Hey, you don't institute an ordinance or a vote on an ordinance without a public hearing on it.
Right, so I think we've probably hashed through all of the information we need to hash through at this point, so I'd like to call the vote. All those in favor of withdrawing the questions from the November ballot, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Thank you very much. So I'll have to tell the clerk that,
So we still should have a public hearing on the 22nd.
yeah, or I'll tell her, whoever you want to tell her.
Yeah, just to be straightforward with you, now be my intention to withdraw that recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you all very much. I think
Just wanna clarify one thing. We, as a committee, decided that it was most fair to the town voters to break it out into those 4 categories. All the other around, surrounding towns,
Have
we
written a
have one
single
ordinance.
ordinance with everything in it at
One.
once. I think the
We
4
broke
is
it out
probably,
to
That's
the
what we
four.
thought.
is probably gonna be the most reasonable. That sounds like a
We
good
figured
idea.
it was the fairest thing to do.
That was the advice of our council before.
Peter, I guess, it's a procedural thing. If you wasn't here for the original vote, how could you vote?
Oh, that's
on
right.
this
Can I vote on this vote if I wasn't here for the
I
original vote?
I don't know that you could.
Good question.
Well, if you had a tie, he's the tiebreaker, so.
Yeah, but not if he wasn't here.
Right, I understand what you're saying.
You'd have to be more knowledgeable on this than, I don't think myself as an authority. Oh, God.
I mean, he wasn't the one that brought the motion up, though, so you would think that he wouldn't be the one that could.
No, the vote would be the same thing. I just sat in that speech for quite a few years.
Yeah, I don't,
And that's the only reason-
I
that's
know
the only
exactly
reason
what
I
you're
asked it.
asking, and I'm not sure.
My memory is that it's more of a, who can make the motion to reconsider and bring it up. It's not on the table, but as I sit here, I'm thinking he could vote. But what we ought to do is check
We
with
better
somebody.
find out, yep.
If the vote, is a tie, then it fails, because it's, you see what I'm saying? So, those of you who feel the way you do need Peter.
We have, or we need, or we need one.
You missed this one.
Andrew, we've seen you abstain a lot in the past, you can always abstain from this one, right? I'm not.
All right, we
I'm
will
not
look
terribly
into,
hurt
we will
either
look
way.
into the legality of our last vote specifically and make sure, because I think Reggie raises an important,
Very good.
You know, it wouldn't be needed, Peter. So if there's an issue, can we call a separate meeting to have like a re-vote, or like how do we?
I think it just goes down.
It just goes down.
I think that's the best we can,
We think it goes
Yeah.
down, however,
We don't-
if we're gonna call anyway, we might as well ask that question. What other remedies available to the
right, well,
board?
we need to find out.
Yep.
Jewel?
I just thank you all for listening so patiently. I appreciate that, thank you.
I think when you voted to do this referendum question, there was a question about the availability of the vote. We don't have a lot of people, because there was a limit. But
She signed a lease.
Yeah.
That I know.
And maybe we can like sublease it to some other site. They have a vote. Yeah.
But the only thing that
All right.
there was no question you find out how this vote.
I'm afraid we need to move on, because we have many more things to do tonight. Do you have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the last.
Last 4 meetings.
Fine.
Bye.
Thank you. I know, we're so close.
All right. Clear the room, please. Clear, quickly and quiet.
Do we have to leave? Is that what he said?
No. If we're leaving, we've got to go quick.
All right. We're on the minutes. We have a second? Okay, all those in favor? Great. All right, next, public hearings. Do you want to take these separately or all together? We better go separately. I'd like to open a public hearing for a victualer's license for the Grand Victoria Inn. Any comment from the public?
And I don't.
Hearing none, I'd like to go to the, like a motion for the approval.
Second that.
All those in favor? I think that's 5 and no opposed. Okay, for the Grand Victoria. I'd like to open a public hearing for an entertainment permit for the Steam Mill Brewing Company. Any comments on an entertainment permit for Steam Mill Brewing from the public? Hearing none, I'd like to close this hearing and go to the board. I'd like a motion to,
Make a motion to approve entertainment permit for the casino building.
Can we go down and keep it up? You open the-
all those in favor? Okay, Casino Brewing entertainment permit is approved. I'd like to open a public hearing for the entertainment permit for the Gem Theater. Any input from the public on an entertainment permit for the Gem?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to close this hearing at this time and go to the board.
Okay, make a motion to approve the entertainment permit for the Gem.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Great. I'd like to open up public hearing for an entertainment permit for Roosters Roadhouse. Any comment from the public on the entertainment permit for Roosters Roadhouse?
Have they not had an entertainment there before? Is this a new license or is this sort of
It's
renewal?
yeah, it's renewal public,
Renewal?
as far as my understanding.
Renewal.
Yeah.
It's a renewal every year.
All right, I'd like to close this, you're right, it's renewal every year. I'd like to close this public hearing and go to the board.
Make a motion to approve the entertainment permit for Mr. Roadhouse.
Second?
All those in favor? All right, I'd like to open a public hearing for a liquor license renewal for the Grand Victoria Inn. Any comment from the public? Hearing none, I'd like to close this public hearing and go to the board.
Make a motion that we approve the liquor license for the Grand Victoria Inn.
I'll second.
All those in favor? All right, I'd like to open a public hearing for a liquor license extension for the Gem. Why is it an extension?
They wanna do stuff out on the sidewalk, I believe, so.
Okay.
Tables out on the sidewalk.
Anyway, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Any questions from the public? Hearing none, I'd like to close this public hearing and go to the board.
I make a motion that we approve the liquor license for the Gem extension.
I'll second.
All those in favor? All right. I'd like to open a public hearing for the liquor license renewal for the Roosters Roadhouse. Any comment from the public? Hearing none, I'd like to close this public hearing and go to the board.
I make a motion that we approve the liquor license renewal for the Roosters Roadhouse.
I'll second.
All those in favor? All right.
Madam, why is the heat on?
I don't know. I'm like, that's the pellets.
It is the pellets.
They're just putting in the fuel. They haven't necessarily put it on.
No, we're feeding for the furnace.
All right, so, another public hearing, is this really a public hearing?
Yeah, you just have to have it for the general assistance.
Okay, so I'd like to open a public hearing, on the update to the general assistant maximums. Any comment from the public? Go ahead.
What does that mean?
We noticed here.
Sorry.
I was gonna ask
Yeah.
that.
You guys have to sign it.
David's got it.
The state of Maine, while the towns administer general assistance, the state of Maine actually oversees it. So it's one of those local programs that we really run in accordance with the way the state wants us to. And that means that if you have an eligible general assistance recipient and they come in, you can't say, here's $5 for your food for the month. The requirement is that it's, in Bethel's case, I'm assuming it's like gonna be 30 or something dollars a month, a week for food. Basically, that's, and it also does that for rents and food and personal items, things of that nature. And because, the cost of things changes each and every year, that has to be redone.
Okay, that's the update.
Right, so they've had essentially a cost of living update to the general assistance. Any other questions from the public? I'd like to close this public hearing and go to the board.
I make a motion that we approve the updated general assistance maximums.
All those in favor? All right, that closes the public hearing portion of our meeting. All right, items for discussion and possible action. So we have before us a possible vote to schedule a special town meeting concerning the funding of the improvements to the sewage treatment plant.
Okay, last meeting was my first meeting with you, and it seems like we've got to go and redo everything that we did. It's my belief that this action that you took last time about entering into this grant program to update the sewer plant needs to be voted upon by the citizens. And the town attorney and rural development agree with that. So in order to do that, I'm recommending to you that you have a town meeting at your next regular select board meeting and vote on that. And these warrants, these articles have to be voted in a very strict form. I'm sure you've seen these before, where you lay out the town's existing debt, and you have this wording that has to be quite precise in order to qualify for this loaning grant for rural development. It can't just be by the board deciding to go ahead and do this. You have to go through this process. And the reason that I would recommend that you do it at your next meeting is it has to be done fairly quickly before the money disappears. Rural development will give that money to another needy town if you don't, they're holding it for Bethel now, but they won't hold it longer than another month. I've told them that you have voted to do this and that you want to consider it and you're going through the process, and they will hold it while you do it. But if you don't schedule this town meeting within the month, they will move along and award that money to someone else. I'm not saying that to hold it over you, I'm just telling you the way it is. So if you want, and you voted that you did, if you want to pursue this funding, then you have to have a town meeting at your next select board meeting in order to see if the voters that come to that meeting would vote to do it.
Does everyone understand the issue now? Okay. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the warrant for the special town meeting.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
So did our vote last month have anything? Did that have any?
I think it reserved the funds.
What's that?
I think it reserved the funds, but didn't necessarily make us eligible. I think we had to have a town meeting to be eligible to actually receive the funds.
Because you decided to do it, I went ahead and did this work and moved us one step further down the road of doing it. Had you voted not to do it, I wouldn't have done any of this.
Okay.
Town meeting towns, selectmen only have certain limited authorities in the state of Maine. You can set parking ordinances. You can vote on general assistance maximums. Most other things have to go before the voters.
Any other questions from the board? I would say that my only concern, which is always is the usual concern with special town meetings, in that quite often we don't get a large turnout, and so approval or not tends to hinge on relatively small representation. But again, if we can do our best as a board to get the word out that this is an important issue and that we need good representation from the town voters, that's to our advantage.
So what again is the warrant? Is that, I'm looking at a whole agreement here.
It is this.
What's on the back of this? Okay.
The voters have to vote on this complicated thing. What you're deciding to do is post this. We post it where people can read it, and then that declares the town meeting. People come to the town meeting, hopefully. Every registered voter in the town will come to your next select board meeting, I'm sure. And that's a joke. And but the only people that can schedule a town meeting is the select board. So, in order to do that, the 5 of you need to sign the top 5 pages. It's this page here, it's just, you have to sign it, so. I'm leaving everything to be signed with you, because I know that you're a trustworthy young gentleman.
All right, but we still need the vote. Any other questions on this, on the warrant?
So we're not voting to spend money, we're voting to.
Let the people decide whether they want to spend money.
Yes.
Right.
I still don't wanna spend money, right?
I fully,
I'll still
yes,
send it
I
to them.
understand. All right, any other comments or questions from the board? All right, all those in favor? All right, so we can sign those warrants and off we go.
He's got a bunch of stuff down there.
Yeah, you've got a ton of stuff to
He's
sign.
got a ton of stuff.
Feel free to start signing your life away and passing them around. All right. So the next item on the agenda is an agreement for exchange of properties with the Bethel Water District.
We have a couple of representatives of the water district here this evening, and I'm sure that they've waited patiently and.
Very patiently, yes.
You're both fine gentlemen.
Thank you.
And would you like to talk to the board about this?
I mean, we've kind of all gone through this. This took a way longer than it should have. And our apologies, it was kind of out of our hands as well. But it's basically everything we talked about. I'm sure you guys need to have your lawyer review it before you can sign it. Our lawyer presented it and we voted to accept it, so it's really up to you guys.
So we're voting on accepting this agreement that.
Right, which we
Two
talked,
agreements.
what we talked about before, so essentially, we're gonna trade you our fine piece of property on Philbrook Street for the West Bethel School property, and we're gonna, and we'll transfer the lease payments from Sunday River, we'll go to the
What we
town.
talked about,
Yeah.
the last meeting that we
Yeah.
had about this,
Yeah,
okay.
and,
The water district office will then relocate to West Bethel.
right,
And as a
And-
compensation, the water district will mount a box, a
Yeah.
payment box, on the town office.
somewhere in the building at the discretion of you guys, I believe is how it's written.
A good service.
Oh, right, so our customers will not be upset that they cannot pay.
Right, because we're afraid of getting a lot of backlash for that, because there was a tremendous amount of people that actually go to the little green building and pay their bill, which I completely respect, so we wanted to have an alternative for that. And also, because we won't have that building, we need a place in town to do testing, so we would use the town, you know, Lucian and Donnie would come in periodically, draw water out of the bathroom or something, just to test the water. But we have to we have to register that with the state and all that, as this is the official
The
testing.
official test site.
Testing site, so there's language in there about that as well.
Great.
And the lease situation with Sunday River, did you want to explain that?
Well, it's just, we have a lease, we're about halfway through it. It was 19-year lease. We're on year 10 right now. I am sure at that time, when it renews, Sunday River will come down and negotiate, a new lease with you guys, and, it's something that's been in effect for, a little interesting backstory, I don't mean to make this meeting any longer, but, the water district leased Sunday River when it was first forming, leased on the top of the mountain for where the tower for T2, well, what used to be T2, and, all that stuff. And then it was quite interesting, because Doc Hudson, I'm sure some of you will remember, signed on both sides. He was a trustee of Sunday River, and he was a trustee of the water district. So the actual original lease, he signed on both sides. So I could speak in a conflict of interest, but anyway, it technically, due to the Bingham Trust, that the water district was managing, that was technically not legal to do that. And as part of the process that we went through to get the Bingham Forest as a town entity, through the state attorney general's office, the state attorney general's office put that into the lease so that it's actually now, it's good and strong and would stand up in court if there was something going on there.
Great.
Just a little history.
Good. Any other questions on the water district exchange?
I talked to a couple of the employees here and there was a little concern about the lockbox. Is there any liability that would come to town if people are putting payments in it and something like that, would it get stolen or damaged?
Our insurance would cover it.
And was there, and I didn't see any issues when I read it, but some people had wanted the question asked, is there gonna be any, like, is the town, are they gonna be, people in the office here, are they gonna be expected to do anything, or is it just gonna be a box?
It's just gonna be, people come in, they say I have a payment for the water district, all they'd have to do is go put it in the.
So essentially there'll be no processing
Nope,
or anything
nope,
like that?
no hands-on, no nothing. No.
The good, had they come to me, as maybe they should, my explanation to them would have been that we are here to serve the public. And if this is beneficial to the public, then it's something we should embrace and try to make it work.
I agree, I was more concerned about the liability thing, if people put payments in there and then you guys don't.
Yeah,
pay.
if you guys get broke into and our insurance would cover that.
Okay.
So, we're all set with that.
Great.
And that's an issue.
Yes,
Yeah, so
yes,
so it turns out. All right, do we have a motion?
unfortunately.
I make a motion that we present this information to the attorney to review the contract before we sign.
I'll second.
Has this been reviewed by the attorney?
No, I don't believe that, is it?
I have no knowledge that that.
Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second?
Peter,
Yes.
just the one thing, on the front page where you're looking, maybe the town manager marked that, on the front page where you're looking, it refers to the leasing, being
Oh,
the CNL from Florida.
yeah.
And that's
Oh, right,
not the
now
case
it's- Now
anymore.
it's Boyne.
Yeah, and you have that lease there, and we'll make sure this gets corrected, so when it goes to your attorney, it refers to that,
Okay.
you know, that it's right.
Good, thank
But
you.
as of right now, it's not right, but you do have the lease.
All right,
So we voted on it pending all your stuff, and then what would happen is when you guys get your final approval and all that, then we'll set a closing date and everybody will sign off everything.
The town manager has no desire to gross out his temporary employers. However, I take blood thinners, and coincidentally, they brought the police in, and I was bleeding, and I bled on the agreement.
Is that what that is?
That's
to
what it
make
is.
it binding. All right, we have a motion and a second, to send this to our lawyers. All those in favor? All right, great, thank you very much. Next item of business.
Copy off any bloodborne pathogens.
Is the review and possible action on the purchase of winter sand. Thank you for waiting all this time.
It was bid, there was one bidder who put his bid in on time, and that Mr. Tibbetts is in front of you, and he was coincidentally also the low bidder at $6.
Well, that's
gas.
kind of nice you doing that. Used to be
The
Bernie
Public
Weisman.
Works Director and I certainly recommend that you award the bid to the low bidder, who
Thank
is
you.
currently the supplier of sand for you at the same price last year.
Can I have a motion?
Yep, motion to award the bid to Richie Tibbetts. The agreed upon $6 a yard.
Second.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion?
Normally you have a bid in, what happened?
Yeah, we put one in, but we were, two things, we were late, and we're also more than Richard.
All right, here we have it. All those in favor? All right, thank you. Moving on. Now, report of the town clerk. Town clerk is not here. I would get D, right? Report for us?
She didn't give me any reports.
That was certainly an informative session.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes the wheels.
Did you learn something?
Probably
Probably more than you wanted to know.
Probably. Report of the town manager.
Town manager submitted a written report.
Oh,
I don't have much to say. I would comment about this process. I thought it was really healthy, and the board showed great patience and listening, and I really appreciated that, and I respect you for that. It's not easy to be a select board member. If I might make a suggestion, perhaps in the future, when you establish an ad hoc committee, there should be written, something written to go by. Because I think folks over time develop a different understanding over what the marching orders are. So just a piece of paper writing down simply what the committee's supposed to do.
Well, I think we did that, and I'm not sure we then looked at it back at ourselves once we wrote it. It might have been just as much I would say in this case, based on your reading, it was more our forgetting what we had charged them with than what they understood as the charge. But I could be wrong. I don't want to speak for all of
I
us.
thought, sure.
My understanding was absolutely that they were gonna create language that would be looked at and passed on and used as ordinance creation.
And that was in the second part of what she did.
Right. So I'm not gonna, I think we did produce that document, I just don't think we went, I don't think I went back to it.
I will tell you that it's very controversial and a lot of hard, I want to say it the way I mean it, people feel deeply about the issue on two sides. And when you have that, and you know, this isn't something that's going on in Washington, it's going on here in Bethel, Maine, and they're sitting here and you're sitting here, and it makes for a tough situation. Everyone feels kind of threatened, and they want to point out what they really meant. And it just makes for a difficult thing to work through, and what I want to say is I thought you did admirably.
I think one thing that's changed since we started the committee was partly the way the state went.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that, you know, when you usually develop an ordinance, you usually develop an ordinance to be more restrictive, you know, on a particular, and this is kind of the opposite of that. And that the way, I didn't anticipate the state going the way that they did, and that, for me, that threw a wrench into how things kind of.
Yes, I feel like the state sent us a curveball.
You know.
I mean, I think their goal was to protect us.
Right.
But I think they also made it maybe socially, politically challenging at the local level to, but that's fine. I'm not.
Lesson learned.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly was mixed up in this all along through, and I mean, we Christine and I both talked to the town lawyer about, you know, how to proceed on stuff 2 or 3 different times, and we were told once, and the reading, even at the committee level at one meeting, was that at some point there would be in November an up or down vote, like a yes or no. And when we proceeded to ask that question of the town lawyer, oh no, that's what you have to do is produce ordinances, and then they will vote, the town will vote on the ordinances. That went on to a point, and the question became from those who asked it, well, how come other towns just voted up or down? What's the difference with us? I proceeded to ask the town manager, what's the difference with us if Kingfield just said yay or nay, and now the town lawyer says we have to produce ordinances? So she went to the town lawyer, and the town lawyer says, well, no, if you wanted to produce like 4 questions, you could do that, And our answer was,
Okay, let's do that.
yeah, we can do that, but why didn't you tell us this when you fed us, you know, some other information? I mean, that's how some of this mix-up has gone along, and let's say, when you sit here, you depend on your counsel for
So, yeah,
answers, but.